Dr. Nutt here. We're going to continue our discussion on prosocial behavior. Why some people help can sometimes be due to those social situations in which they find themselves. Okay, so let's talk about some of those critical factors of this social situation. And let's look at the environment. We'll look at, say, a rural environment versus, say, an urban environment where there's lots of people in an urban setting, and whereas in a rural setting, you're just not as exposed to as many people. Looking at these environmental differences or these specific social situations, um, small towns, about half of the people who walked by someone that was in need of help actually offered to help a person. Okay. Whereas in a large city, in an urban area, only 15% of those that are considered to be passerby stop to help. So we know there is a difference there one theory about this situational factor is, according to the urban overload hypothesis, if you put urban dwellers in a calmer situation, less stimulating environment, they would be as likely as anyone else to reach out and help others. And so that's one theory about why a person would be less likely to experience help in an urban setting versus a rural setting. So, does it matter where you grew up? Does that influence whether or not you're likely to help someone? Well, the opportunity for helping arises, it matters more whether the incident occurs. So it's not so much where you grew up, but it's where the incident of helping really occurs that seems to be important. I also loaded in your Blackboard, or uploaded in your Blackboard, a "What Would You Do" clip. And I love these videos with John Kionis. And really, when a person asks for help, are you likely to give it? So take a look at that in your Blackboard. Now, another critical situational factor in whether or not a person is likely to help is the bystander effect. Now, this came up many, many years ago with an incident of a woman named Kitty Genovese. And in 1964, she was a victim that was murdered in a large city. And what the police discovered was the fact that 38 people witnessed, whether they heard the assault, or if they even saw some of the happenings. But 38 people witnessed this incident and failed to call the police. So what was going on is known as the bystander effect. This still goes on today, as you see on the screen in front of you. Lonte and Darley in 1970 were considered to be the first researchers of the bystander effect. Okay, and they really wanted to know, why did these people not help? They witnessed but failed to render aid. What Lonte and Darley discovered in the research is that numbers matter. The greater the number of bystanders who witness an emergency or a helping situation, the less likely any one of them is to help the victim. Even if you look at bystander intervention, the green line here is related to the participants who believe they were the only bystander. Again, these individuals are more likely to help. And this was on research by Darley and Lonte in 1968, and it was on someone that was having a seizure. Now, the orange line here would be participants who believed there was one other bystander beside themselves. And then you see The blue line would be participants who believed there were 4 other bystanders beside themselves. And these are the individuals right here that helped the less. And again, it was because they believed there were 4 other people besides themselves. Whereas in this first line right here, you see these participants believed they were the only bystander, okay, to help the victim. Now, what Lante and Darley have identified is basically a bystander intervention decision tree. And I'd like you to be familiar with this decision tree that people really have to kind of process before they will actually render aid or help someone. Number one, they have to notice there's even an incident. Then they have to interpret it as an emergency. And then another important decision factor in this tree would be to assume responsibility. Okay, and then they have to know what's the appropriate form of assistance needed, and then they have to act on it. So we see a person goes through several different decisions before they'll decide to act. Now, if you think back to that first critical process or decision in the decision tree, and that is noticing an event, how important or critical that is, and whether or not a person's likely to receive help. Now, Darley and Batson, this was in 1973, demonstrated that something as trivial as being in a hurry can make more of a difference than what kind of a person someone is. And what they did in this interesting research study, it's called the Good Samaritan study. If you want to research it further, they researched seminary students. Now, these are individuals that are preparing for a profession in full-time ministry or helping parishioners. So they're considered very religious people. But what they discovered in this Good Samaritan study was the fact that if they could create some type of hurry for this seminary student, they were less likely to notice someone that needed help, or they were in such a big hurry. Again, they failed to notice that a person needed help. So check that out. It's a very interesting study. Now, after noticing the situation, the next item on the decision tree is interpreting the event as an emergency. To help, the bystander really must interpret the event as the emergency where help is needed. And if people assume that nothing's wrong, they will not help. However, when other bystanders are present, people are more likely to assume that it is not an emergency. So again, more people present, the slower you are to receive help. What occurs is this phenomenon of pluralistic ignorance. Bystanders assuming that nothing is wrong in an emergency because no one else actually looks concerned. We're looking to other people for that information, and so they make basically a wrong assumption if they're in a situation where help is warranted. Now, another important concept why people, why bystanders don't act or don't seek out help for a victim in need of help. But it's even if we interpret a situation as an emergency, what happens is we have to decide that it's our responsibility to do something. And oftentimes people fail at this specific point in the decision tree where they fail to take on the responsibility. The responsibility basically becomes diffused, and that's what's referred to as diffusion of responsibility. Again, responsibility gets shared with the group instead of that one individual acting out to give help or provide help. As I just mentioned, the diffusion of responsibility is the fact that each bystander's sense of responsibility of help actually decreases as the number of witnesses increase. So this concludes our discussion on part 3 of prosocial behavior. You can check out this Helping Others video clip in your Blackboard. Have a great day.